Europe's economies are 10 times the size of Russia. Of course, we've got the money. Absolutely, we could do this. Um, if we, in part, we'd have to buy American arms and ammunition, which, by the way, Trump would be delighted by, and is one thing which might keep him on the hook.
Mm.
If we said we're going to buy American, we build up our own defense industry. Of course, Stig, we have the resources to do it. It's a matter of political will.
Look, we talk about Ukraine because he says he'll end the war in Ukraine. The fear for Ukraine is that there might not be much left of their country if he does. We know that one of his strategic advisors said that Ukraine must lose Crimea in order to get a deal done. Timothy, this is your very much area of expertise. Trump talks a good game. He wants to settle this. But this only settles one of two ways. Either the Russians withdraw completely or Ukrainians give up some of their land. Neither one of them seem to want to do this. Can Trump actually control either of those outcomes?
No, but he can pull the rug out from under Ukraine. I mean, if Trump is bad news for us, it's a disaster for Ukraine. It's extremely unlikely that he'll get a deal in the sense of a peace settlement because there's no deal that Putin and Zelensky will accept. But what he can do is to slash the American military and economic support. And at that point, either we, Britain and Europe, step into the breach, or Ukraine is simply lost. You know, you were mentioning Crimea and so on. We talk so lightly about territorial compromise. We wouldn't talk so lightly if it was a matter of giving up, Cornwall and Devon and Somerset, which is what it's like for Ukrainians. I've talked to people whose homes are now in occupied territory, whose relatives are facing a brutal Russian occupation. But when I was in Kiev 6 weeks ago, people were privately accepting that they're not going to be able to get back most of that territory. And by the way, it's a huge territory. It's the size of Portugal and Slovenia together, two European countries. They're not going to be able to get it back militarily. So what they need now is security. And that means stepping up the military support to stabilize the front line and put the Russians on the back foot, and then inviting them to NATO and giving them security support until they get into NATO. And that's what we need to do. Otherwise, Putin will have won, Ukraine will have lost.
And I wondered, Timothy, whether we actually can afford to do. Say America does pull the rug out, as you say, and Europe and Britain have to step in. Well, we have no money. We can't afford. We're saying we're not sure when we're going to get to 2.5% GDP. Germany's wobbly. France could easily be wobbly in the next couple of years. Is there any actual economic and political appetite to fully step up to fill the shoes of the
The
US?
economies of the West are 20 times the size of the economy of Russia. Europe's economies are 10 times the size of Russia. Of course, we've got the money. Absolutely, we could do this. In part, we'd have to buy American arms and ammunition, which, by the way, Trump would be delighted by, and is one thing which might keep him on the hook. If we said we're going to buy American, we build up our own defense industry. Of course, Stig, we have the resources to do it. It's a matter of political will.
Jane, what did you make of Trump speaking to Zelensky with Elon Musk in the room?
Yeah, I mean, well, as I think I said the other day, it felt like an AI-generated headline that just, it felt like something we would have never dreamt of.
Clickbait.
It's like put some random big names in an AI generator and come up with a headline. It just feels remarkable. But obviously, it is a sign that Elon Musk is going to have a central role in Trump's administration in some way, which, yeah, is, you could say it's ominous. You could say, well, he's a man who understands communication.
Well, some people say, because we're quite down. I'm quite down on Elon Musk because I think he's annoying and weird and not very likable. But he has built up Tesla. SpaceX is a massive, massive success. I mean, SpaceX is one of the biggest business successes of the last 10 years.
Yeah,
but Twitter's not a success.
But Twitter's not a success. But Twitter got him to this point.
Absolutely.
He bought Twitter to get Trump to get in power, and he's going to be in power.
Yeah, but I have to say, that aside, I mean, the idea that he is intervening in a phone call between, the president-elect of America and the president of Ukraine feels strange and unsettling. I was in Ukraine in the summer and I went there to interview the Klitschkos. So Vitaly is obviously mayor of Kyiv. And I asked him about the prospect of Trump coming in. And I think it was on one level just kind of wanting to manifest, a different situation, because he was saying, oh, I think Trump will change his mind once he gets into power. I think he will change his tune. I think he will actually not go through with what he says he will go through with, which I think he was also, trying to send that out to God's ears. But,
a lot of people think that. No, we had Kurt Volker, who used to be his NATO representative, saying exactly that. He just wants to jolly NATO along.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to lose. He hates the idea of Putin losing.
Right. But I think the other thing is he wants to be able to say, I end wars. It's one of his slogans. And I sort of think he doesn't really care about the means. I think he just wants to be able to go, tick, I got a second term, tick, I end wars. But I think the human cost to that prospect is terrifying. I mean, I will say, aside from the money, there is a lack of volunteers now in Ukraine. Morale is quite low. They're facing the fourth winter of this war. Prospects aren't good. And actually, when you talk about the land, that might be ceded, I mean, obviously, symbolically, that's a really difficult thing for Ukrainians to get their head around. They don't want to. But also, a lot of that is just devastated. What sort of land are you giving up right now?
If Donald Trump does put more tariffs on imports, can we find shelter with the Europeans, or do we need to smile at Donald Trump? Timothy, what do you think? What's the best approach here?
Well, there's certainly no orgasms for Britain in the arrival of Donald Trump, because we're now in a very difficult place where we've made it much more difficult to access our biggest single market. And now he's going to slap tariffs on almost everybody. Listen, whatever you think of Europe or Brexit, half our trade is with the EU, only about 12-13% with the US. So obviously we should try and mitigate the impact of Trump. But what we shouldn't do, self-evidently, is make a short-term deal, quote unquote, special relationship, which actually makes it more difficult to improve the economic relationship with our largest single market. But we are going to be doing the splits, and it's going to be quite painful.
What about this idea then of an exemption or a free trade deal? And do you think Donald Trump is swayable?
So Kim Darroch, who is the British ambassador to Washington in the first Trump administration, said, sure, there might be a deal on offer, but basic condition is you have to open our market to almost everything American, including chlorinated chicken and all those agricultural products that we're very unhappy to have. And our farmers who are already very unhappy, right, about the new inheritance rules will be even more unhappy. So A, yeah, there might be a deal on offer, but it's probably a deal we can't accept. B, that would make it even more difficult in our relationship with Europe, which we're just trying to reset.
Jane, how do you see this? Do you think this is inevitable?
I sort of agree with everything Tim just said, really. I think that it's really difficult because I don't know that Trump is to be trusted. And, if we do suck up to the US and try to cut a deal with Trump, to the detriment of our trade relationship with Europe, who knows how that's going to go? Hopefully he's only going to be in charge for the next 4 years, unless he changes the constitution. But B, we need a much, much longer term relationship with Europe than that. So it does seem, even if we do get a better deal with the US because of it, it just seems a little bit short-sighted. I think there's a great argument for Peter Mandelson, being the pick for UK ambassador, because he will be good at this stuff. And I think that will be really helpful. But I think ultimately it just feels very bullying. It feels like we're just being held to ransom by a bully at the moment on everything, on all the topics we're going to talk about. This idea of America is sort of so protectionist and isolationist and leaving us just really backed into a corner. It doesn't feel good.
And yet the positive voices on this say that this is not inevitable, that we shouldn't kind of retaliate by saying, well, if you do this, of course, we're going to do that. That shouldn't be kind of the blood in the water. And also that there is still something to be said for, I won't say the special, but the relationship between America and the UK, that this is not what we do to each other. That's the optimistic view.
Yeah, that is the optimistic view. And there are other sort of voices of optimism, saying that because of what we chose to do with Brexit, that Trump will actually respect that. And the idea that we've sort of been a bit renegade and we've gone out on our own, and where he sees the EU as a bit of an amorphous blob and we're not that could go in our favour. But my feeling is we're just quite exposed at the moment. I mean, we are literally this little island in between the two of them, trying to wonder who to hitch our wagon to.
It's amazing, actually, how I've been struck by how sanguine and optimistic many people have been, because they recognise how powerful Donald Trump is. And it strikes me that people who I would expect to be critical have been less critical because he's now the reality. And actually, when he was in opposition, when he wasn't going to be president and may not have won, people were very willing to criticise him. Now everyone has to do a deal with him.
Right.
And it's amazing how the tone, you hear it in the Labour government, you hear it on people who fundamentally dislike him. They dislike his politics, they dislike his morals, and now they have to sit down and play nicely with him. And that's happening all over the world.
No, totally. I mean, you look at everyone who was trying to get him on the phone last week, to have the longest call possible with him. And of course, that's diplomacy. That's just being realistic and being pragmatic. But it does feel like a 180, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. I mentioned a phone call earlier, allegedly one between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. It was reported in the Washington Post and Reuters, saying that after he won the election, he did speak to Putin. But, and you can do with this information what you choose, the Kremlin has said the call did not take place. It calls the Washington Post report pure fiction and added that Putin has no specific plans to speak to Trump at the moment.